from I will be reaching out and calling out someone who is going to be breaking the ground this morning, who is going to be giving us a simplified version of what it is we're about to get into. I will be calling on Mr. Ikena Ugudimpa. He's the head of relations and advocacy unit at the LEAP Africa. He's the head of government relations and advocacy unit. He's going to be giving us a background and a context setting. He's basically going to be giving us an overview of what the National Youth Policy is about. If you're already on this call, Mr. Ikena Ogudimpa, over to you now. Thank you. Is he on this call already? Sorry, Tech Team, can you help us highlight him if he's already, if he has joined this call? Can you please highlight him? Please let me know. Let us know so we know we're together. Is Mr. Ikena Nicole already? Okay, okay. Regardless, we're going to be moving on regardless. So before he comes up to give us an overview, okay, he said yes, it's now on the call. Okay. Before he comes up to give us an overview, just by a show of hands and comments in the comment section, how many of us have heard about the National Youth Policy before now? How many of us have heard about the National Youth Policy before now? I want to ask I will do a little bit of quiz about it this morning, but just before us, please text him whenever he's around and available already. Just tell me he's ready to speak and I will know so that I can give space for him to do so. Meanwhile, while we're still waiting, how many of us know about the National Youth Policy before now? You can drop the message in the chat section. How many of us know about it? So I'm checking the chat box to see now. I have not seen any response yet. So okay, when did the last National Youth Policy expire? Let's do some National Youth Policy quiz right now. I'm still waiting for responses. Sorry, tech team, I hope I am audible so that I'm not just speaking to myself and thinking everyone can hear me. Okay, thank you very much. I asked again, is Mr. Ikena is Mr. Ikena on the call already? Okay, so Rosemary says 2023. So you're very, very correct. The last National Youth Policy lasted for just about between 2019 to 2023. I have a prize for you when I see you. So yes, that is when the last National Youth Policy document expired, as I would call it. So it's no longer relevant. That is the essence why we as young people, we have been clamoring for another youth policy, this time around, one that is not only just a document written on paper, but one that carries the voice, actual voices of actual youth. So we no longer want a situation where someone who is not in the battlefield is helping us to make decisions for those of us who are right there at the forefront. We now want the voices of youth who live these experiences, who face it daily, to be the ones contributing their voices to the things that matter to them most. That is why we're on this call this morning. Do we have Mr. Ikena already? Our time is already far gone and fast spent. Okay, while we are still waiting for Mr. Ikena, let me seize the opportunity to ask anybody. Does anybody know about the content or the focus of the National Youth Policy? Just anybody, you can drop in the comment section. Don't forget, this is not a class. It's not an exam hall. You're not going to fail anything. So How many of us know about the national youth policy? What exactly know about the national youth policy? Does anybody? Okay, so while I know some persons are typing, obviously, I know some persons are typing. So, a national youth policy largely say it's a representation of the aspirations of every young Nigerian. So it captures details, things that practically will affect the life of every young person, affect how you school, affect how you work, affect. In fact, we were playing a video just now, one very amazing video that was talking about different aspects that affect youth, from education, from climate, everything. That is what is captured in the national youth policy. All right, they are critical things, critical ideas that will shape the life of young Nigerians if taken into action. And that is, like I mentioned, that is why we are here again this morning. We're here again just in a bid to chip this in while we have some. Yes, exactly. It's an official framework that explains how the country plans to support, develop, and build the capacity of youth. Amazing, amazing. So correct, so correct. So while we are here this morning, we are having our own form of virtual conversation. Some persons right now are in front of the House of Assembly having their own kind of conversation. But whether in pain, whether in whatsoever it is, we are all trying to ensure that our voices are heard all the same. So, tech team, do we have Mr. Ikena already? We have basically set the agenda by ourselves while we're still waiting for Mr. Ikena. If I get a go ahead from the tech team that he's not available yet, I can just go on and ensure that we get to the next agenda so that we do not burn time without doing nothing else. So tech team, you are the ones I am waiting for practically. So, in the absence of Mr. Ikena, I think we could move on to the next agenda. If he comes up, we can look for a way to accommodate him in the program. So, okay, so all right. So I will be handing over to the co-captain. I think she drives better than me. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I will be handing you over now shortly to Deborah. Deborah, over to you.
Hello, Celestine. Thank you so much. Please confirm that you can see and you can hear me.
Loud and clear. Loud and clear.
All right. Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you so much for opening the session. And I can promise each and every one of us that we're going to have an amazing time and a very educative time. So moving on, because of our time, we're going to be going into the panel session. And I think I would also need us to confirm that our panelists are on ground. This interactive discussion is going to be from evidence to action, integrating youth realities into Nigeria's national youth policy. And like Celestina said, this is really why we are here today, to ensure that there is youth inclusion in our national youth policies. So I'm going to be calling our panelists, the amazing people that we have put together to speak to us today. I'm going to be calling on their names, and please help me in the chat box and jam your hands, your virtual hands together as we welcome each of our panelists. All right. So first on our panelist seat today, we have Mr. Stephen Daniel, is the Senior Associate of Nigerian Economic Summit Group. Are you here with us, Mr. Stephen? Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Thank you very much. Great to be here.
Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. On the panelists as well, we have Sholakwe Shonuga, the Director of Legislature Mentorship Initiative. Please confirm that you're with us as well.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, ma'am. Good morning. All right. So our third panelist for today is Shadrach Terry's Digital Skills Innovation Lead, Mind the Gap. Please confirm that you're with us as well. Okay, so I think I will just call on our moderator. I want to believe that our third panelist will be joining us very soon. And moderating this very interactive panelist session is the wonderful Evangeline Olakpade, the Programs Officer of Nigerian Youth SDG. Over to you, Evangeline.
Thank you so much, Deborah. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon from wherever you're joining us from. My name is Evangeline Olakpade, and I'm the Programs Officer at NG Youth SDGs. And I will be moderating this session this morning. So as Deborah said, we have 3 panelists this morning, and I'll just give a short, brief introduction of those who will be on the panel this morning, and then we'll proceed. So first we have Stephen Daniel, or Dr. Progress as is popularly known, and he's a senior associate at the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, and there he works across policy design, research coordination, and multi-stakeholder engagement priorities. It anchors and supports several NESG public-private dialogue platforms, including food systems, youth development, human and economic security, and initiatives. And then there he engages government, the private sector, the academia, and development partners. He has over 8 years of experience across policy, research, education, and the nonprofit sector, and his work focuses on translating evidence into actionable reforms that strengthens human capital, productivity, and inclusive growth. He holds academic training in development studies and research and public policy, and he's passionate about youth and development-driven leadership. He's also committed to advancing practical solutions that improve economic resilience and quality of life. Please, let's give him a big hand as we welcome him. Next, we have Sholakwe Shonuga. And Sholakwe Shonuga is the director of the Legislative Mentorship Initiative. She's a trash sector leader committed to sustainable development and transformative impact in Nigeria, with a focus on inclusion, public sector reform, and policy advancement. She currently serves as Deputy Chief of Staff and Head of Programs at the Conference of Speakers and Heads of African Parliament. She also recently completed a master's degree in Rights and Social Policy at Maynooth University, Ireland, as a Roger Casement Fellow under the Ireland Fellowship Program, where she specialized in human rights, social policy processes, and global justice. And just like I mentioned earlier, she's the director of the Legislative Mentorship Initiative, where she leads initiatives to nurture the next generation of public sector leaders, equipping young professionals with the skills, knowledge, and network required to drive governance reforms in Nigeria. So before LMI, she was a program policy and strategic partnerships manager at ElectR. There, it's a non-partisan organization advancing women's political representation in Africa. And there she spearheaded policy advocacy. Our work continues to shape policy governance and inclusive development across Nigeria and beyond, with a strong commitment to advancing the participation of women and youth in public leadership. So let's give a big hand as well while I call on Dr. Akpem Teres Shadrach. While I give his profile. So Dr. Akpem is a veterinarian, a social entrepreneur, thought leader, and change agent. He has over 8 years of experience in animal health, agriculture, social entrepreneurship, human resource development, digital innovation, and sustainable development. He holds a master's degree in veterinary preventive medicine and a master's in business administration. He has a passion for empowering youth, and he leads the community manager at Gap and has trained and mentored over 30,000 youth and digital skills facilitator, fostering digital skills among job seekers, entrepreneurs, and corporate workers. And he embodies expertise in social entrepreneurship, agribusiness, digital innovation, strategic doing, and youth empowerment. Let's make welcome. First on the panel this morning is Stephen Daniel, and I will be directing my questions first to you. But before I do that, I'd just like to provide a brief overview of what we're doing this morning. So the theme for the panel this morning is From Evidence to Action, Integrating Youth Realities into Nigeria's National Youth Policy. And what do we mean by this? It simply means we're providing a strategic pathway for how the National Youth Policy can be translated from just evidence into actionable implementation. And we know that National Youth Policy provides a strategic framework for youth development in Nigeria. But despite this, we've seen that there's been a lot of implementation challenges, socioeconomic pressures, and evolving youth realities. The years goes by, and as a result, there's a need to come together as youth and discuss what are these challenges, what are the implementation gaps that has been in place, and how do we solve these problems, and at the same time have a comprehensive national youth policy. We heard, just like the moderator mentioned earlier, that there has not been a national youth policy in Nigeria for about 3 years now, which isn't so good. So there are a lot of issues that needs to be solved: youth unemployment, underemployment, but we have barriers to enterprise financing and skills transitioning, gender disparities, weak institutional coordination and accountability. So as a result, I'll be calling on Stephen Daniel this morning. I hope you can all hear me.
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. So I'll be calling on Stephen Daniel this morning to first, of course, just give us what are the economic precarity, or rather, what is one of the biggest weaknesses that you think has been hindering the National Youth Policy, or rather, in practical terms, what do you think are the financing and institutional coordination mechanisms that must be built into the National Youth Policy to ensure that delivery happens rather than just aspirations?
Thank you very much. Let me start by appreciating the SDGs Youth Network for this opportunity to contribute to this conversation. Oftentimes, conversations about young people around issues of governance, policy, work, we often focus on what young people lack. And I hope that today we can shift from that lens, because across our African continent, young people have, brilliant ideas, energy, and lived understanding of today's challenges. You've just asked the question about what the weakness of the National Youth Policy is. I think one of our challenge or weakness is that systems are not designed to absorb this youthful population that we have. And when structures fail to connect skills to opportunities, there's bound to be frustration. More frustration will grow among young people, and then there will be an erosion of trust. I think this session matters because we are asking deeper question of how do we redesign youth policy, or design it to better ensure that young people are not just participants in development conversation, but are partners in decision making, contributing to peace building, and then driving inclusive growth across the country. That shift, more than any single program, will determine our collective future as a nation. To then shift to your question of how financing, or what financing and institutional mechanism
coordination mechanisms, yes, must be built into National Youth Policy. Yeah.
Okay. So, like I mentioned before, one issue that we're facing is implementation. Implementation of policy has failed over time in our own experience for two main reasons, if you ask me. One is that we lack ring fencing finances to implement and deliver on such policy. And number two is the lack of accountability chain. So if something falls out from the plan that has been designed to help young people, who is going to be held accountable for not delivering those results? Those two things are lacking. And so practically, if we should make it work, we must first ensure that there's a dedicated youth financing window within the existing institutions that we have in our country. Rather than creating any new agency, we should embed youth-focused financing quotas within these institutions that exist. For instance, the Bank of Industry, Development Bank of Nigeria, NISA, and other development finance institutions we have. What kind of mechanism or quota have they given to young people to participate in assessing this financing that they have? And what transparent reporting requirements do they have? Number two would be performance-based budgeting. Youth programs are quite many. There's a multitude of youth programs in our country at the moment, but they do not receive the fund that they require based on just political announcements. They should receive funds based on measurable outcomes. What is the number of jobs that these ideas are creating? What is the number of enterprises that are surviving beyond 3 years? Because the Faith Foundation result survey that happens every year shows that MSME do not survive beyond 3 years. So what number of MSMEs are going from startup phase and have stayed over the period of time that it's supposed to be to contribute to economic growth in our country? Number three will be private sector integration, right from the design stage. At NESG, we consistently see that policy fails when the private sector actors are consulted too late in the process. So youth policy must embed industry bodies in the implementation committee of such policy, not just as stakeholder, but as partners for the delivery of those promises that the policy hold. And lastly, I would say we need a youth policy delivery dashboard. So we must go just beyond passing the youth policy to publicly accessible dashboard where people can quarterly see update on what we are doing with the youth policy. Are we on course? Are we off track? When citizens see that there is progress, pressure can improve our performance as a country, because delivery requires financing discipline and then clarity from all the institutions and not just political declaration.
Thank you very much, Dr. Progress. Yes, we will agree with me that finance is very important to drive meaningful youth participation and to ensure inclusive youth development in Nigeria. So I'll be moving over to Sholakbe, and my question to you will be that, as the Director of Legislative Mentorship Initiative, what are the main gaps between Nigeria's youth policy commitments and enforceable legislative or budgetary tracking? I hope you can all hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
And thank you very much to you for anchoring the conversation, and also to the SCG Youth Forum for putting this together. It's always a pleasure to connect with young people and contribute to important conversation. Your question in terms of gaps that are affecting enforceable legislative and budget tracking, I think is a very important question, and also is one that I'm very happy that we're bringing up when it comes to the National Youth Policy, because from a legislative perspective, the National Youth Policy isn't enforceable by the legislature because it's not an act of parliament. And so I think that it's very important to distinguish the differences between policy and legislation. Policy comes from the executive. It is adopted by the executive, and it's like a guiding document for the executive that can then incorporate, various actions from other arms of government. But in terms of legislative action, the legislator cannot hold the National Youth Policy and say, we want to enforce this, and we're going to make sure that everything within this document is accepted and is followed through. Oversight cannot be done by the legislature around the National Youth Policy, because that's not the role of the legislature. And so I think in terms of ensuring that there is some sort of oversight and some sort of budgetary tracking and some sort of enforceable system put in place to make sure that the national youth policy is legally binding. I think that the ministry will need to put in a lot of effort, put in budgetary lines. Once there are budgetary lines in something from the ministry, then the legislature can follow the budgetary lines and then go on and do oversight and go on and say, okay, where is the amount that you put in for this, and this within the budget? How can we ensure that you've done it? How can we ensure that we're tracking? And so I think that it's a bit of a tricky one, but it's not an impossible thing to do as long as we work with the ministry to ensure that there's budgetary lines put in place for the implementation of the national youth policy. And so in designing a policy, I think that there also needs to be a clear implementation plans with also money put behind it by the government. Once we do that and we can, ensure that it's in the ministry's budget, then we can then call on the legislature to ensure that we're enforcing. And even if there are various ministry priorities and there are various legislative priorities, that's where we come in as citizens, and that's where we come in as active and involved citizens, saying that this and this and this was put in the national youth policy, and it was so and so is the budget line, and we can write to the legislature and say, we want to know what happened to this amount of money that was allocated for this priority that was included in the national youth policy. We can call for public hearing. We can ensure that we're working with the various youth committees within the National Assembly. Another, I think, tricky thing is the fact that youth policy is something that various youth policies it cuts across the ministries. While the Ministry of Youth coordinates, there's also the Ministry of Labour and Employment, which is also very, very important for young people. There's the Ministry of the various ministries that affect young people as well. And so being able to coordinate all of those things and ensure that we're looking at it from a broad and wide perspective as opposed to a limiting perspective will be very important to ensure that we are driving accountability for the promises that are going to be made within the policy. I think I'll stop here. I hope I haven't, confused anyone, but thank you.
Thank you so much, Sholakwe, and thank you for bringing clarity to your role as a legislature. I think this is also very important for everyone, knowing that what you do majorly on this is more like follow-up or tracking to ensure that what is being promised is implemented. So I'll move over to Dr. Shadrach, and I was told that he's already on the call. Dr. Shadrach, can you say hello just to confirm that you're here?
Hi.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. All right, so I'll be asking you this from you work with young people a lot, especially considering the fact that you work with Mind the Gap and you've done a lot of community engagement with young people. I mean, thousands of young people in Nigeria. So from your engagement with young people across Nigeria, where do you think the national policy feel disconnected from the actual youth realities? So where is the disconnection from the national youth policy and actual youth realities?
Okay, thank you so much. First, I want to sincerely apologize for jumping on this call very late because I had a disconnect between my calendar notification and the time for the program. My calendar was 30 minutes late. And then when I was jumping, I realized that, the call is already on. So my sincere apologies. To your question on the disconnection between young people and the policy in itself, I'll use a practical case scenario. So last year, I was having an engagement with core members. So these are Nigerian graduates, and there are thousands in an NYSC camp in Benue State. And I was speaking to them about the plan by the federal government to achieve 95% digital literacy by the year 2030. I asked them, how many of them were aware of this plan? I had about 1,000, close to 1,300 able-bodied young people in the room. Not one person was aware of what I said. I went on again to ask them, how many of you are aware of a document called the National Youth Policy? I was very specific, 2019 to 2023. I had less than 1% affirm that they were aware of that document. Now, of that 1%, none of them had ever read it before. Now, we could decide to throw the blames around now and say, well, government, you didn't do a good job to, create awareness about this document, so young people are not aware. Or we can say, young people, you are interested about the wrong things, and you don't want to know what is there for you in this document. Now, let's shift it back to the foundation. The youth policy document in the first place is created to serve as that compass to guide government in itself, development partners, entrepreneurs, captains of industry to understand that as long as you are engaging with young people, these are their interests. This is how you should focus what you are doing, and this is how you should be able to drive it. Where this connection starts is first and foremost from the point where the building process does not even seem to give the level of awareness that, because it's a serious matter. It means that if a wrong thing ends up in a youth policy document, it's going to be implemented one way or the other, but it's going to be implemented in a way that would cost the young persons who are supposed to be beneficiaries. If something is also missing, while the world in other places is also advancing in terms of driving youth agenda, in our own case, it will be missing. So first, awareness. That has been a major problem. Very few young people today. And like we know, the current youth policy was outdated as of 2023. Effort was made to start the process because I happened to be part of the team that was set up for the one of 2024 to 27, but I can't recall the last time we met. So currently now in Nigeria, as it were, we don't have a national youth policy that we can engage with. So it also can speak to the commitment of government as to whether or not they want to tell the world over their plan for young people. Secondly, the priority issues. If you look at the National Youth Policy 2023 to 2019 to 2023, the conversation around the digital economy and AI, right, was not very strongly worded, right? It didn't speak to the reality that a few years down the line, we'll be where we are and be talking about the digital economy at the scale that we're talking about. So it means that the interests of young people, as far as those realities are concerned, were also not effectively covered. So how would someone be interested in a document that doesn't speak their reality? Another thing too is also the problem of migration. Young people now, maybe on this call, if we were going to do a poll and say, how many of you, keeping all factors constant, want to leave Nigeria? Perhaps all hands will go up. Now, that is not where the message is. It's simply a symptom to a foundational problem, which is saying that the challenges around unemployment, around security, around poverty, around decent jobs, decent healthcare are not being met. So I would rather go elsewhere where there is a perception or a semblance of getting that thing. Now, remember I said it's not guaranteed, but we feel if we leave Nigeria, perhaps the odds will be better elsewhere. So these are the areas where I feel there's a strong disconnection. And since I'm just speaking about disconnections, I will not share my thoughts on what should be done differently till we'll get to that point. But these 3 points for me are areas where the policy failed to address, at least the one that has expired, and it's now a major concern for young people because the realities they are facing are not reflected. And if you bury it also on what has been said, the previous speaker said, this thing has a lot of cross-cutting impact. The federal government says, let's make a national youth policy, right? If the state governments don't pick it up holistically, it's not a matter of Lagos doing it, Ekiti doing it, and the rest of us not doing it. If there's that collective commitment is not shown, at best, we'll have very disproportionate outcomes. That is also something that needs to be looked at. And that is why, even in terms of awareness, if you are talking about issues of youth policy engagement, you'll be shocked that some states will be doing very well because they have domesticated it and made the one that suits their state, because every state has their unique realities. Other states maybe try to adopt it a hook, line, sinker, and have not even made any progress because they failed to also account for all of those things. So those are my thoughts for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shedrack. It's good that you're on this panel this morning. And I'm saying this because you mentioned that you were part of the committee that was, selected for drafting a new one since the last one has expired since 2023. So, and to think that nothing has been done since 2024, that the committee was set up till now, or rather that there hasn't been a remarkable progress.
Some progress was made, but the change in leadership, the former minister was changed, and things have been on hold since then. We made some decent progress in terms of what should be captured, but like I said, when the change in the ministers was effected, it pretty much stalled things. And of course, that's a discussion for another day, but it's also one of those concerns we should highlight. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. All right. So because of our time, I'll be moving straight to Dr. Progress. And I'd like you to, talk to us about policy perspective. Where do you think youth development currently sits? I mean, is it central, peripheral, fragmented? And what structure do you think is required to position youth as a core economic strategy?
Thank you very much. I think Sholape give some answer to this question already. Let me be very honest. Right now, youth development in Nigeria is fragmented. It's neither peripheral nor center. It's very, very fragmented, like she mentioned. Some youth issues are domiciled at the Ministry of Labor, Ministry of Youth, Ministry of Education. They all have something to do with youth. So execution, when it comes to core issues of young people, is fragmented. We have youth programs under multiple ministries that are also targeting the same stakeholder, but there's no single economic anchor that treats our young people as a productivity strategy. And that's a very real issue for our country. From my own work experience, youth development must move from being seen as just a social policy, something to being treated as an economic growth strategy. Our median age as a country at the moment is at 18. And if youth are not economically productive, our demographic profile would then become a liability to us as a nation. But if we use them productively, they can become our greatest assets. So what structure is required? If you ask me, I will say three things. One is young people as a cross-cutting economic KPI. So every major reform, the tax reform that we've just seen, the industrial policy that was just launched yesterday, our digital economic strategy in the agricultural sector, should have measurable youth absorption targets. So not just general inclusion language that we want to have young people on the table make decisions, but specific numbers that we can hold government accountable to. Second point will be a central coordinating mechanism right at the highest level, the level of the president, because youth policy cannot just sit in one ministry. It needs an interministerial coordination structure with authority, not just meetings, that is tied to our economic planning and budgeting processes. And then lastly, I would say is data-driven tracking. So we cannot manage what we do not measure. Youth employment, enterprise survival rates, access to certain services or products, this must be tracked on a quarterly or even possible monthly basis, not just annual. Until these youth outcomes are embedded into our economic planning and our physical frameworks that we have at the moment, they will continue to stay fragmented and will not help us achieve our potential as a nation. So it's very, very important that we get these three things right. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Progress. Yeah, thank you for mentioning that, the fact that youth efforts is looking, or rather seems fragmented, having different institutions handling different things. And thank you for the recommendations you provided on having, especially with respect to inclusion, on having specific numbers. Thank you so much for that point. I mean, it's not just about, okay, let's include youth, and then we have sparse numbers being represented, but, having a specific number that everyone knows, and that is what is being worked with. So I'll be moving over to Shalakwe once again. So what are the legislative instruments, that's budget tracking, constituency engagement, and amendments, that can be used to strengthen accountability for youth policy implementation?
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for that question. I think we've already kind of touched on that a little bit. And the truth is that for us to be able to understand how we can utilize the role of the legislature in this, I think the first thing, of course, would be to distinguish the role of the legislature and the role of the executive. So the executive, as we know, is the one that is developing this youth policy. And the role of the executive is to implement laws, is to create policies like this, is to ensure that, the system is moving in a way that is beneficial for whole of society. They enforce, they administer. And then the role of the legislature is to create laws and to ensure that there is oversight for these laws. And so if we want to talk about mechanisms that would, strengthen the implementation of these laws, such as budgetary allocations and hello, can you hear me? You can hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay. Sorry, my screen is frozen over here. I'm not sure why, but such as budgetary allocations and laws and things like that, I think that we can take it maybe in a three-pronged approach. The first one, and I think that it was the speaker before Dr. Progress that mentioned this, is domestication. Domestication is very important for implementing laws, because when you live in Abuja or you live in Lagos and you see things moving around you, you assume that that's how, the whole of Nigeria is, but it's very far from the truth. And if the policy isn't domesticated on the state level, then there will be a very wide gap between what's perhaps happening in Abuja or Lagos and what's perhaps happening in Kano or Ebonyi. So it's very important that the policy is domesticated on the state level. If it's domesticated on the state level, then we can even work with state legislatures to ensure that there's some sort of enforcement on those levels. We can ensure that we're working not just with the national, but also with the subnational and also the local government legislatures to ensure that there's oversight for things that were budgeted for in the state budget, in the federal budget, in the local government budget, because I think that that's also something else that we're not utilizing enough. A lot of people focus on the federal level of government, and while the federal is, on top and it sets the tone for what happens, underneath, the subnationals and the local governments are so important, especially now that the local government has some sort of autonomy and some sort of control of the budget. They can be allocated funding. They can actually move the needle for youth for youth empowerment. So not underestimating the importance of as well as the national legislatures. Another thing is understand the budget to a setting that was committed to and was budgeted for. We can call it out as citizens. And so, of course, the legislature is tracking and the legislature is, doing their oversight, but there's still the role that we have to play to ensure that the machinery of government is working for us. Another thing is the fragmentation. I know that we've all mentioned it, but that's a very big reality for us. The fact that youth policy is split among various ministries, and it's the mandate of the ministries. That's just the way it is, especially because majority of the population in Nigeria is young people. So every single ministry, to be honest, has a mandate to have, youth included in what they're doing. And so as the Ministry of Youth is playing a coordination role towards ensuring that the policy is implemented and the priority of youth is, known across the ministries, the legislature also has a role. So the Committee of Youth, whether it's in the Senate or in the House of Representatives, has a mandate to ensure that there's statutory reporting across committees. And so if the Committee on Education, for instance, is sitting, and then the Committee on Youth is sitting, and the Committee on Employment is sitting, and they're all doing their own thing, there's only so far we can go. So while we're encouraging cross-coordination on the executive level, we should also encourage cross-coordination on the legislative level as well, so that when the various committees are meeting, there's some sort of coordination and cooperation between these things. And then, of course, a lot of constituency engagement as well, which also brings to bear the importance of local government engagement, subnational engagement, and helping people to understand that they actually have the power. And so if we as people come together and insist that this is what we want, literally the legislature is the people's house. They are our representatives. They are there to work for us. So if we insist on something, we can, make the legislature work for us. And I think that the last thing that I just wanted to add is that the Ministry of Youth is doing some work to updating the national youth policy. And I know that there's been some zonal hearings or zonal what's the word?
Consultations.
Thank you very much. There's been some zonal consultations, yes. And I know that the only two zones left are the Southwest and the Southeast. And those are going to take place in Osun and Enugu, I think maybe even before the end of the month, if not the beginning of next month. And the national consultation should start in April. So the ministry is working, the ministry is consulting. And of course, that's why it's also important, the conversation that we're having here, so that whatever conclusions or recommendations we have can also feed into the consultations that the ministry is having. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much, Sholakpe. Yes.
Just to note that the one form is happening.
Please go on, Dr. Progress.
Sorry, Evangeline, I wanted to note that the consultations for Ondo is starting tomorrow, actually.
Oh, wow. So, thank you for letting us know. Yeah, domestication is very important, and this way the lived realities of people across different states and different regions can be, incorporated into the policy. Very, very key point. Yeah, and at the same time, for budgetary tracking, domestication would help, the legislature do their work effectively. So over to you, Dr. Shedrack. And if you were to define the top 5 non-negotiable priorities for the next National Youth Policy implementation, what would they be and why?
That list is long. But the good thing is that if you went across the 36 states and the FCT and you asked everybody to describe how they feel when they are hungry, maybe you might get 36 different interpretations, but the same meaning will be one. I just want to eat, right? And so I try to narrow down this to, first, I will go back to what I said initially, the conversation on migration. You see, this is such an important conversation that sometimes we downplay to cruise. You know, we see our fellow countrymen and women leaving the country. Some will say, bye-bye Nigeria, may Nigeria never happen to you. It might sound like cruise in the moment, but if you look beyond that, it tells a very deep story. The next national youth policy, and I'm speaking as a young person, at least staying on the cadre of the Africa Youth Charter that puts young people between the ages of 15 to 35, that we must pay attention to the issue of migration. If we operate with other countries in a situation whereby we are the only ones disadvantaged, yet we call these things bilateral agreements, then we need to rethink it. It is possible for a lot of young people, because at the end of the day, why do we migrate? You know, you're looking for safety, you want to have employment, you want to be able to earn a decent wage and the likes. What if our policy made that possible for young people to still remain in Nigeria? Our talent pool is here. We still offer that value across continents and across other parts of the world without necessarily having to migrate. That is one thing that the policy needs to speak to very creatively, so that we don't have young people who are desperate to migrate, ending up falling for scams. We see these stories every day on X. We see people sell off their properties, end up abroad, only to realize that they were scammed and they have to be shipped back. It's a tragedy that needs to be addressed. Then agriculture. Whether we like it or not, agriculture still holds one of the strongest sectors or opportunities as far as addressing the challenges around decent work, unemployment, poverty, hunger is concerned for our country. But we need to move beyond the current approach of saying things and not doing. You see, we can import all the food we want in this world, but no one ever built sufficiency on the back of importation. And that is why the same way you hear the West or Trump saying America first, it means that America before anyone else. We must put not just Nigeria first, but the young person first. And it's a no-brainer, because we are the active pool of this country. Meaning, if as a youthful population, we are not mobilized sufficiently to give value to our country, we are simply, in effect, a ticking bomb. So it's in the interest of government to now leverage the agricultural sector to mop up the challenge of unemployment, poverty, hunger, malnutrition, and the likes across the length and breadth of this country. That is one thing we must pay close attention to. Then, in terms of entrepreneurship, and as an entrepreneur, I try to find this balance. Everyone is not going to be an employer. But what that also means is that entrepreneurship today in this country is accounting for between 80 to 85% of the jobs that we have. So there's very limited space in the corporate world, but as an entrepreneur by default, you have the capacity to expand on yourself as much as your creativity allows you. There are also self-entrepreneurship initiatives that are coming out now. You see young people with digital tools now spinning up initiatives and earning a living. AI has disrupted the space all over. We must look at how we harness these things for young people to be able to tap into, because, again, the inflow comes to the country and we're better off for it. Then education. Quality education must be given premium. I mean, we are looking to host an event next month at my workspace on the subject matter of artificial intelligence. Because as beautiful as ChatGPT, Gemini, Cloud, DeepSeek, and the likes have made our lives better, are we paying attention to how much it is turning young people into, in quotes, mindless professionals who have completely outsourced their capacity for critical thinking to AI. You put out a call for applications and you get 3,000 entries. And when you start reviewing it, it's tragic. Some will literally lift everything like that and put for you, and then you're wondering, what has happened? This policy must reflect these realities in a way that artificial intelligence is deployed more responsibly for the sake of our future. There was a report that came out 2 weeks ago that says that the Gen Z era or generation is the first generation in history that has developed a lower level of intelligence quotient compared to the generation before them. Meaning from, like, we millennials, reports show clearly that we are higher in terms of intelligence compared to the boomers. Now, this report is showing what it's showing, and the numbers are there, but I think this trend can be reversed. Policy needs to account for it. If not, we'll be struggling with it because the Nigerian Youth SDGs Network can decide to do awareness, drive projects, but imagine if this comes out as a policy thing to ensure that it's engaged correctly. This is something to pay attention to. Then, employability. We need to rethink it. The idea around productivity must be emphasized to, if I'm supposed to go to a workspace, whether I do a corporate job or whatever, it needs to prioritize productivity over ticking time boxes. So if I can deliver my job under 2 hours, let our work environment reflect that. Rather than saying that my 2 hours, I need to come and show up from 8 to 4 simply because that's the time frame that they work. So these dogmas that no longer serve a reality of today's workforce needs to be adjusted accordingly. And in the midst of all this, that part where we now need to see a deliberate intention, because go through history, whether Nigeria, Africa, in fact, let's say Nigeria and Africa, we are full of policies that have come and gone. The question that everyone will always ask is, why are we such a continent where we are notorious for being a graveyard for excellent policies with zilch execution? So we must ask ourselves, for this policy that we're talking about now, if we're going to talk about these issues that affect young people, beyond highlighting them, how can it be effectively executed in a way that truly reflects these realities? Because if we are going to be living in mass because we don't have jobs, if we are going to be taught wrongly because our educational processes are no longer up to date, if employment will not reflect the reality of the workforce today, it's us losing. Who do you think tomorrow will take over? Young people. The question will be whether or not those young people are prepared and empowered enough to deliver the kind of leadership that the next generation will require. So these are the issues I think needs to be given a lot of priority if we are going to get it right. And also if we are going to learn from the mistakes of the former policy, where I think they had lapsed on, especially around the digital economy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shedrack. Without wasting much of our time, I would like to proceed to asking Dr. Progress the last question. He has another engagement and would need to leave soon. So, Dr. Progress, if you can hear me, can you give us like 3 recommendations, economically strategic actions that should be priorities within the next 24 months under the National Youth Policy? What should they be? And I'll combine it with this. What do you think is the most single urgent reform Nigeria must prioritize for young people in 2026?
Thank you very much. Apologies, I have another commitment for 12. I would have really loved to stay. Like Dr. Teresa mentioned, that there are multiple issues, but you've restricted me to just 3 and in the next 24 months. So from an economic urgency perspective, the 3 top priorities for me will be: 1, National Youth Skills to Market Acceleration Program. not just skills training, because we have a lot of skills training, but skills that are tied to real sector demand in manufacturing, in agro-processing, digital services, in energy, and the likes. Every training program must answer one key question: where will the income come from? The second thing I will prioritize is Youth Enterprise De-risking Fund, because a lot of private sector people would not at the moment fund certain sector because of the risks that are involved. And young Nigerians are very entrepreneurial, but access to finance remains a very critical barrier for them. So we need a blended finance vehicle that reduces risk for banks lending to young people enterprises using grantees, first loss capital, and then performance incentive. And the last one I will prioritize will be digital access infrastructure, because digital inclusion is now an economic inclusion matter. Broadband penetration, affordable devices, and community innovation hubs must be scaled, especially outside of Lagos and Abuja, because the realities of Lagos and Abuja differs quite from the other states in Nigeria. So we must go beyond Lagos and Abuja. If we get skills, capital, and connectivity right within the next 24 months, I strongly believe that the multiplier effects will be very, very visible. And in one sentence, one single urgent reform that Nigeria must prioritize as regards young people in 2024 is the fact that we must move from training young people for certificates to integrating them into productive economic value chains. So that shift must happen from not just activities alone, but to productivity. We must move from just making announcements to absorbing these young people into the decision-making process, not just using policy language, but ensuring that economic outcomes really impact the lives of our young people. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Barrett. It was great having you on this panel this morning, already in the afternoon. So yeah, it's great having you on board. Thank you so much for the points you've shared. And I'll just like to say that, just like you mentioned, it's important to absorb young people beyond using the policy language, but I mean practically absorbing them into the decision-making processes. Then, just like you mentioned, productive economic value chains is also very important for young people. And then I'll link this back to what Dr. about, decent work and unemployment. These are some of the key areas that should be looked into if you're going to have events in Nigeria. And also linking it back to the issue of migration and JAPA, like you mentioned, escape. And a lot of people are not even conscious of what the reality is and where they want to escape to. And some of them end up, meeting situations that are not so pleasurable for them. Thank you so much. I'll be moving over to Sholakbe now for our last question. And before I go on, I'd like to say thank you, everyone, once again for joining us. Today, we are discussing moving from evidence to action, integrating youth realities into Nigeria's national youth policy. So to Sholakbe, your last question would be that if this consultation produces a policy brief, what concrete legislative pathway would you advise to ensure that it does not end as a document, but influences policy action?
All right, thank you very much for the question. I think it's a very good one, especially because we're now moving from conversation to action, which is always the most important thing, because we can talk about all the solutions, but if we don't, swing into action, then we've done ourselves a disservice. And so in terms of a clear pathway for action, especially with regard to engaging the legislature, you would need to first of all identify your stakeholders within the legislature, whether you want to engage with the Senate or the House of Representatives. I find that the House of Representatives is a lot more approachable than the Senate because they're the ones that are closer to the people, especially because they're on the constituency level as opposed to the district level. And then identify who the chairman of the committee or the various committees that you would want to engage with, especially because the conversations have been a bit broad, especially in terms of employability, economic viability, and coordination amongst the various ministries. So you would need to identify all your stakeholders within the legislature, all the committee heads that you would want to engage with, and put your policy brief in the form of a memorandum. That memorandum should be submitted to your committee chairs alongside a cover letter that perhaps the SDG Youth Forum will sign. Those two documents should be submitted to the various committee chairs that you want to engage with. And then after you've submitted, of course, you would need to follow up because they would be receiving various letters from various stakeholders. It's also important to find a champion within the House of Representatives, so somebody, or within the legislature, no matter the one that you want to engage with first, because whatever you do in the House would eventually get to the Senate, and whatever you do in the Senate would eventually get to the House. So when you identify a legislative champion, so maybe a member of the committee or the chairman of the committee or a member of the young legislators in parliament group, whatever the case may be, somebody that has the power, influence, and the interest to be able to push this agenda forward for you, because as much as we are doing our best on the outside, you need somebody on the inside that's going to help to push this agenda. Once we've identified that legislative champion, that person can then follow up actively for you. And then the findings in your memorandum or in your policy brief can then translate into a public hearing or a technical session of the committee, or something that is also tabled at the committee during one of their meetings, where representatives from organization or other stakeholders can get to also interact and engage with the committee and put forward, these actionable steps that the committee can take, and the committee can also mandate the various ministries, departments, and agencies to take. Following up on that, the committee can then decide to do a resolution and say so and so things are the things that we are going to do, or they can then move a motion on the floor of the House to say we had this engagement and these are the things that we want to do. And if that motion is adopted by the House or by the Senate, then you can then proceed to hold them to account and continue to follow up to push the agenda. That's like that's like the most basic thing that can be done, and also perhaps the easiest, lowest hanging fruit. The other thing is also to keep an eye on the budget and ensure that promises within the National Youth Policy are budgeted for. So whatever budget is being presented, or being able to engage with the ministry to ensure that things are being budgeted for. And then once that budget is signed into assent in the next budgetary cycle by the president, then the next thing will be to follow up closely to ensure that those things are being done. So I think with these two things, in terms of engaging with the committee and also engaging with the budgetary process, these are clear pathways to influence, legislature, and also influence things to go in the right direction, especially for young people in Nigeria. And I'd really like to say that I really encourage you. And if you need any support on any level, please let me know, because this is very important. And I mean, young people are the majority of the population of Nigeria, and so our benefit is the benefit of entirety of society and majority of society. And kudos on all the work that has been done so far. And I really look forward to following this through to see actionable solutions and actionable results in the coming months. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sholakbe, for sharing this. I must say that you've given us a bridge to walk over. Thank you so much. Yeah, so I think the last question now is going to Dr. Shadrack. Or maybe before I do that, would you like to share, Shalakwe, like maybe one sentence, what do you think is the single most urgent reform Nigeria must prioritize for young people in 2026? In one sentence. Thank you. Can you hear me? Hello? Can we still hear me?
You are actually audible.
Oh, okay. Shalakwe, I'm not sure you heard me.
I didn't catch that. No, what did you say, please?
Sorry. So I wanted to move on to Dr. Shadrach, but I felt you should just capture this once and for all for us. Like in one sentence, what do you think is the most single urgent reform Nigeria must prioritize for young people in 2026? Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. I think my network was a bit funny, so I didn't hear that. But I think that a very big priority for us in Nigeria should be education. There's a huge gap within the education sector, and there've been a lot of conversations surrounding reforming, the educational sector in the country. But I think that if we can get education right, it will then have a domino effect and a lot of things will fall into place. And whether it's basic education or tertiary education or informal education systems, but we really do need to get education right. The previous number for out of school children in 2012 was 12 million. But as of last year, it's now between 18 to 20 million children that are out of school. And I know that Dr. Shadrach was talking about how a lot of young people rely on AI, which is also, a little bit of the problem. But I think that if we get education right and we make education an imperative, a lot of people will be enlightened enough to have some sort of domino effect in our society. I know that the education curriculum was changed recently, sometime last year. But there's also a lack of coordination in a sense, because a lot of people didn't even know within the education sector that it was updated. And the previous curriculum is still running, and there are quite a lot of gaps within the education sector. And while the Minister for Education, the Minister for State for Education, and all the other stakeholders within the education sector are working hard to ensure that, our education system is up to par. I think that if we do take it, run with it, and prioritize it very, very seriously, it will have exponential beneficial implications for Nigeria in the years to come.
Thank you so much for that. Yes, the educational sector needs to be paid attention to, critical attention for that matter. Yeah, and just like you mentioned, it would, go a long way in affecting other sectors. The economic sector will be affected. I mean, in a positive sense now, and so many other aspects would definitely, be affected positively. Thank you so much, Shalakwe. Now to Dr. Shadrach, your last question. Many policies claim youth participation, but what would meaningful youth institutionalized participation look like in practice? Not just in consultation now, but decision-making power. And I'd like you to wrap it up as well with the same question I had with Shalakwe earlier. What do you think is the most single urgent reform Nigeria must prioritize for young people in 2026? I think we've already overshot our time, and if you can make this as brief as possible, it will be much appreciated. Thank you so much, Dr. Shadrach. Over to you.
Thank you very much. So since you want me to be as brief as possible, there's really nothing that hasn't been said on this call. And in fact, there's really nothing that probably has not been said. We just maybe rehashed it differently, but the realities are still what we have been saying from day one. Can we move past this conversation to sending home a stronger message that whether it's the national youth policy, whether it's the budget implementation, whether it's driving progress in Nigeria, three things I feel must be strengthened in this country, which I noted down. One is accountable systems. What exactly sets us apart from the US, the UK? Let's come back to Africa. What really sets us apart as Nigeria and, say, Rwanda? How accountable is the system to us, and how accountable are we to the system? That's the first thing fundamentally. So this is not even putting it on government or putting it on ourselves. It's saying that as a country, we need to do better. But because the quality of leadership demands that they set the tone, we must strengthen our institutions in a way that ensures that everyone is accountable. So if there's a policy put in place, there should be dire consequences for any component of it or development partner or government agency that fails to live up to those expectations. That's the first thing. Then we need working systems. We thrive so much on who you know in this country that it becomes very difficult, I don't want to say impossible, for the son of a man who knows nobody to be able to break out. Like the saying goes, opportunities are, talent is universal, opportunities are not. So we must make it possible to have a system where hard work pays, where if you're diligent in the space that you're working in, then the system should be able to reward you. And closely tied to that, meritocracy. Talent will always default to where it's rewarded. So the young people living in Nigeria in their droves are living because there's a place where that talent they have is going to be rewarded. Whether or not it's worthwhile long-term is a different conversation entirely. So I think these three things need to be given the attention it deserves, because if it is not done, this policy will still come and will not get the kind of energy that it deserves. And for young people, we need to pay more attention. Let's stop this lukewarm attitude of not wanting to be interested in the system. The quality of political leadership in Nigeria is what is defining everything. We don't have the power to make laws. Our politicians do. How we show commitment to knowing what is happening. How many of us have gone to see what it has been budgeted for young people in the 2026 budget? Now come down to your state. How many of you have gone to look at the budget for young people in your state, for employment, for job creation, and the likes? We must pay attention. If not, we'll simply keep crying victim. But if we take responsibility, we'll raise awareness. And I'll end with this story. A story was told of ants who every single time grasshoppers came and ate them away. Now, there was this ant that eventually, when the grasshopper came to eat it, challenged the grasshopper's right of eating it as food. And then the king of the grasshoppers went back and called the grasshoppers together. And he said, they said it doesn't matter, it's just one small ant, it's inconsequential. Then the grasshopper king said, do you understand what will happen if they come in their numbers? That is the power of young people. Let us understand that if we are not actively involved in the processes that concern our lives and destinies, we will pay for it dearly. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shadrach. I'm sure it's been an insightful session so far. Thank you so much, Shalakwe, and thank you, Dr. Progress. We are so glad to have you share with us all of these thoughts this afternoon. So I'd like to give room to 2 questions before we move on to the next session, and which is like the final session for this engagement. If you have any question, can you drop it in the comments and it will be attended to. Question, comment. I can see that people have been dropping several comments, but I mean, if you have any question, you can as well drop that in the comments. Thank you so much. Do we have anyone, or maybe you would like to speak? maybe ask your question if you don't want to type, if you want to speak. I want to give 2 persons at least the chance to ask their question. You can signify, you can let me know if you have any question. Time is going. How many? Okay. Okay, so we have Ikena, and I think someone already dropped their question in the chat box. So let me ask first before moving to you, Ikena Ugu. So the question says, what are we doing about monitoring and evaluating the NYP before the next review? So I don't know, who should we direct the question to, or Dr. Shalakbe or Dr. Terrace? Who would want to take the question?
Okay, I'm trying to look at the chat to pick it out. Can you read it out again?
Okay, what are we doing about monitoring and evaluating the NYP, that's the National Youth Policy, before the next review?
Okay, I think what we are doing in this room is about what that is, right? Trying to look at what was done in the last 4 years, what was captured in that document, and what we should be looking to do differently. And you see, the thing here again is, and this is also to now young people, because how my mind works is, every time I'm asking myself, what is within my realm of influence? One of them is my ability to search and absorb as much knowledge as possible so that it informs the way I engage. If you cannot look at what is in the 2019 to 2023, you cannot bring out very valuable engagement to contribute forward. That said, there's also the conversation around what we agree are the burning challenges of young people. So this is one of them. I shared already that a committee was put in place. We started work. Not much has happened since then, after the change in leadership. And I'm sure that several other engagements have been going on. Leap Africa has been having other conversations around things bordering on policy. And Faith Foundation, several other organizations. So I think this is basically what this is. Eventually, what I know too is that every policy engagement usually would carry, it is cascaded down to the community levels. So from the states down to the regions, down to the national level. Be on the lookout, and anytime these engagements are happening, whether virtually or physically, let your voice be heard. You never can tell what will come out of it. And I would say this, when we were discussing, at the time they brought me into the committee, some progress had been made. So when I was looking at it, I saw that nothing was said about migration. And I said, how can we be talking about a youth policy for young people in today's world and you will not capture migration? It almost became a fight in the thing in court. Eventually, it was reflected. So imagine if that didn't happen and a policy comes out that says nothing about youth migration. So those are my thoughts on it.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Shadrach. I hope your question has been answered. Ibrahim, I think it was Ibrahim that asked the question. So the next person, Ikena, can you unmute and
Yeah, I think I've done that.
Okay. So you can go ahead, please.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Evangeline. I just want to, first of all, thank the Nigerian Youth SDG for this wonderful opportunity. I mean, since I saw the adverts for this program, I've been waiting for the time. And I think I've not been disappointed. So much of insights, relevant conversations around youth policy and all of that. And then I don't want to go all over what the speakers have said, the panelists, I mean, quite on point. And we can't stop having this conversation if we want get youth our policies relevant to the people, I mean, young people. But then let me just narrow it down to, I'm not sure again which of the panelists were talking about domestication. And I understand how important that is, okay? But, that just kind of pricked me because last year, Enugu State, of course, I'm from Enugu State, just launched its youth policy, and right now there are ongoing conversations so that regions and states can have input into this national youth policy, So I'm just wondering what the place of the state, policies on youth would be when and if, as we are recommending here, they get to domesticate what the national policy would look like. I would have thought that an ideal situation would be for us to have the national policy domesticated, and then if any state would have to have anything, okay, they must ensure that whatever they are we have as a national document. But now, for instance, that Enugu State has its own youth policy, it is possible, very possible, because I don't see the national policy, feeding into the region, the state. So I'm just wondering how that fits in. I think, it's not looking very nice for me. I would have preferred if we had the national and then get to the state to feed into the national so that we can have a synchronized, unified approach to youth issues across the country. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to know if we have Ikena Obudimpa already on the call. He has joined like way earlier, and I'd like to ask if he would like to contribute to that question. Ikena, please confirm you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you, but I didn't get the question clearly. Can you take it again?
Okay. Ikena Ugo now. Can you please reframe?
Sorry
But
about
please, I'd like that you do this quickly. Briefly. Can you please reshare, ask your question again? Ikena Ugo. Oh.
All right, let me share Ikena's question. So this is what Ikena is asking. Every state has a national youth, a state youth policy, and for him, he feels that it should be the other way around. There should be a national youth policy that states would feed off and domesticate, fitting in their own reality, so that whatever is happening from the states fits into what the federal has already created as a way of domesticating the policy from national down to state, which is like up, down, top, bottom. But now that we have states with their own youth policies, will that not impact growth in the national? If we look at our national development, the plans that we have as a nation, if each state have their own policy, where's the opportunity here, and what's the challenge with this approach? Okay, now you're able to answer this. Did you get the question? I'm referring to Ikena of Leap Africa.
Oh, thank you, Joshua. There are two Kenas, so it's quite confusing. Thank you for reading the question. I'm not sure I got the question clearly. You were reading quite slowly, and I tried to get it. But you were asking if since the states already have their state youth policies, where does the national youth policy come in? Is that the question?
Yes, where does the national youth policy come in? Because he said it would have been best that we have a national youth policy that each state now picks based on their own unique reality, or they build off based on their own unique reality to create a state policy. But now that there's no national youth policy and each state is creating their own policy, where's the opportunity here? Where's the challenge and the gaps?
Okay, thank you. Let me know if you can hear me and see me as well. Just want to reconfirm.
Yes, can hear and see you.
Okay, fantastic. So Ikenna, that's a very fantastic question. Ikenna is my friend, just to say as well, even though he's also my namesake. And thank you for the great work you do in Enugu. Normally, what should be, like you've said, is that the national youth policy should be a framework, a national framework that now guides states to domesticate the policy in local context. But it's an embarrassment, and I have to be honest with you that the national policy has been stalled for over 2 years plus, and most states had to go ahead to drive their own process, which is also giving kudos to the states like Lagos, um, Delta. I know a couple of states that have also designed their own youth policy, but there are also lots of states who don't have a youth policy yet. And so, what the national youth policy would do is that when it's passed, then it can now become that tool that young people use to advocate for states to domesticate and create their own national state youth policies. I beg your pardon. So it's still a veritable tool, even with the whole delays and lapses that would change the narrative for young people all over the country. So I think that that's still very valid. The issue I have um, instead is in the ability for these policies to translate into meaningful change, right? We've had for a couple of years that Nigeria doesn't have a policy issue. What we have is an implementation issue, even though that is slightly wrong because the policies itself are lacking in many dimensions. The policies are not centered on delivering, right? The policies are not reflective of the aspirations of young people. I like to call the national policy a DNA of youth. So the desires, the needs, and aspirations of young people. But the question would be how many of these desires, needs, and aspirations are reflected in the policy? And when they are reflected, what is the implementation path? Now, I'll try to summarize with the issue of commitment from both the government, the will, and from also the young people. You would have heard about the youth confab that the president flagged off a couple of months ago. Till date, we've not had anything about that confab. It's stalled, it has zero funding, it has zero, we've not had progress on that. Something with the national youth policy as well. It's taught for 2 years plus. Why funding? Right? We've heard about NYC reforms for a long time, for decades. They've been talking about reforming the NYC. What has stalled it? Maybe funding, maybe the political will. You'd see that with these 3 or 4 examples, that the challenge with youth is tokenism, right? The government, even us as young people, we so much come to talk about youth policy, youth XYZ, but these are just mere words. We don't have the drive, we don't have the political will. When I mean we, I mean the government now, to ensure that these policies translate to meaningful change in local communities. I'll take a custody of the local government system. Without local government autonomy, the national policy might not be as effective as it should be. Because if you look at some of the strategic sorry, I beg your pardon, of the national policy, it has a lot to do with implementation at the local levels. If you think about skill acquisition centers, if you think about economic empowerment, the local government system has a long route to play, a long route to play in that implementation. So where are we with that? Is it effective enough that the LJ system can adopt? So if you look at the context, broad context around the national youth policy and youth development in its entirety, you'd see that there is a huge gap. I'll now, try to link this current, constitution amendment review that's been happening for over the last 2 years now, with what's happening now. You see, there's a lot of shout about the electoral bill because it's really important, right? Elections are next year. You see that there's more shout about women, the gender bill, right? The reserved seats for women. And I was quite surprised that I've not heard anything around young people in the entire constitutional amendments. No advocacy, no strategic thrust, no campaign for youth inclusion. And there are 3 people that are marginalized, 3 sets of people that are marginalized, globally: women, youth, and people living with disabilities. And so if there's a gender bill, which is fantastic, right, going to create reserved seats for women, what about young people? There's no PWD in the National Assembly, last I can remember, right? And there are young people too who fall under that category. So my summary is, beyond pushing for national youth policy, which we are pushing for right now, I think someone said that national policy regional consultation for Southwest will be happening tomorrow. It starts, arrival is tomorrow. It will happen on Friday and Saturday and end on Sunday, and departure is on Sunday. We're also pushing with the Enugu State government to ensure that the Southeast convening would happen in March and we can wrap this up. But when this policy becomes goes live, what happens next? That's what happened with the last one. No implementation, no advocacy, no follow-up, no funding, nothing at all. My summary is that beyond national youth policy being created, beyond states creating theirs, youth voices must be loud. If it is our documents, if it is the only framework that guides how young people are developed in Nigeria, then we have to take ownership of the policy. We need to create programs, we need to create interventions, we need to advocate for the national youth framework, national youth policy, because there's no funding for youth activities in Nigeria, and that's the truth. The funding is fragmented. Of course, you know that every ministry does things around young people. So there's agriculture, there's ICT, every other ministry has youth components in them. But the Ministry of Youth is supposed to be like a coordinating ministry that brings these implementation strategies into a particular framework that we can see. But the truth is that even the ministries, other ministries, are not cooperating in quotes with the Ministry of Youth. And there's something striking that I learned today from Sholape, I guess. She said, as we're also advocating for coordination from the Executive Council, we should also advocate for coordination from the parliamentarians as well, because I don't know if there's any collaboration to deduct what interventions are done for young people at that level. So the summary of this is national policy is effective. Some states have their policies. Most states do not have. Even for the states who have, there's no implementation framework embedded in the policies. The policies itself are fragmented. They are vague. They're not clear, right? I'll give you two case studies with the Kenya Youth Policy, because I've also reviewed the Kenya Youth Policy a couple of times to see how clear it is. In the Kenya Youth Policy, there's something there called AGPO. Because of time, that clause ensures that 30% of government procurement goes to young people. Imagine the impact. I don't know what the implementation rate is, but imagine that Nigeria's youth policy captures that 30% of government procurement, means contracts, everything government is doing, and appointments, 30% must go to young people. That's a clear-cut impact that will have in young people. But if you read the current national youth policy, you see that it's vague. Even youth participation is vague. If not for Not Young to Run bill that was passed a couple of years ago, which we're even thinking, okay, how do we even evaluate the impact of that bill, as at now? You see that youth conversations are actually, it will be brought up during elections, and that's the end of it. So we need to find a way to ensure that the content of this policy is directed to ensure that young people are developed completely, and that young people have the capacity to advocate for issues that concern them, to ensure that this policy doesn't just end in a drive in a shelf. And I'll be very frank with you. I did a review of the national policy, and I needed to find the document. It's not on any Nigerian government website. I said this to the Youth SDGs when I spoke with them last. I had to find this document on the Youth SDGs website and on UNFPA's website. And that's to show how concerned or how interested we are even with the policy that actually affects us. So not to waste time, I think I'll end here, and I really apologize for showing up late as well.
It's okay, Ikenna. Thank you so much for sharing those insights. We've spent a lot of time, and I wouldn't want to delay us any further. Of course, there's one important question that is raised here, but I think we can pend this till we'll come back from the breakout session, which will just be for 10 minutes. And yes, so when we come back, Ibrahim, Farouk, please take note of your question, and you can ask. Okay, Sholape, your hand is raised. You can unmute and speak. Can you hear me? Yes, you can speak. Yes. Okay, I'm not sure.
Okay, all right. I wasn't allowed to unmute before, but I just wanted to say that I run for another meeting, but just to say a huge thank you to you and the entire team for putting this together. If any questions were addressed to me, my network was a bit funny, so I had to switch to my phone for the last few minutes. But just to say a huge thank you to you, everybody in the team, for putting this together. Thank you for having me. And I hope that the breakout sessions and everything else goes super well. And if there are like any pressing questions that have been addressed to me specifically, you could just email them to me and I'll be happy to answer them. Perhaps you can share it with whomever asked later on. But thank you so much. Really appreciate the opportunity to contribute to this conversation, and I wish you a very fruitful deliberation ahead.
Thank you so much, Sholakpe. Thank you for joining us. Bye. Okay, so right now I'll be handing the mic over to Deborah while we wrap up with this session. I mean, while we end this session and just briefly discuss for like 10 minutes for the breakout session. Over to you, Deborah. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Evangeline. Yeah, thank you so much. First, I'd like to say a big thank you to all our speakers. Honestly, I think that this last session, you can literally see we can see the passion in the youth to ensuring that the national youth policy is really addressing all of the issues that we are speaking on today. And that's really why it is important for us to have discussions like this. Thank you so much to all our speakers, really. This has been an amazing time. So we're just going to be going into the breakout session immediately because of time. And we have just 10 minutes for this, please. For each of the breakout rooms, it's going to be 10 breakout rooms. We've created 10 breakout rooms focusing on youth policy and priority areas. I'm very sure that technical team will begin to divide that. So you should see little boxes distributing us into 10 breakout rooms where we'll be having several discussions. And I just want to give us a little guideline on how this discussions would be. So it's us asking questions about what is happening, why is it happening, and what must change. And we'll be having a team lead in each of these breakout sessions. So you're going to be picking a team lead. And in this team leads, there's going to be a reporting template. So you're going to identify 3 top issues in that thematic area that you have joined. What are the root causes of those issues? Highlight one priority policy reform and a measurable target. So we'll be coming back. When we're coming back after 10 minutes, this team leads will be making a presentation on the discussions and the issues that we've been able to present and discuss amongst ourselves. So please ensure that you actually contribute because all of these things are going to be noted down. So I want to confirm that the rooms have been created. All right, so I think you should see an invite now. Please, let's start joining our rooms. Yes, I will be back in 10 minutes. Thank you so much, everyone. So you can pick any room of your interest. You have economic survival, livelihoods, governance, safety, security and conflict, mental health, well-being, migration, mobility, digital life, innovation, climate, environment, identity, inclusion, partnership, and financing.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Hello, everybody.
Yes, Celestine, we can hear you.
Okay. Sorry, have we picked any coordinator yet for anyone to coordinate us in the group?
Am I in a breakout room?
I'm part of the NG Youth SDGs team, and I'm just All right, welcome back, everybody. Welcome back, everybody. I hope we are all back to the meeting. I can see people joining in. Let me take a look at. Okay, yes. Numbers are rising again. You're welcome back, everybody. So at this point, we want to be as strategic and precise with time as possible. So in that regard, we are going to be taking the findings from each of the groups. So what you do for me is that you will raise your hand virtually if you are representing a group, and then we'll just call you and you have a minute to present the findings of your group. So if you are one for health, if you are one for employment, just put your hand up if you have a group representative, and then the tech team will find you and then will unmute you, unmute your mic, and then you have a minute to present the findings of your team to us. Thank you very much. Okay, so while we are waiting for everyone to join in and to raise their hands and to give the point of view from their breakout sessions, I joined the governance and youth voice breakout session, and I'm going to be presenting for my team. So one of the challenges we found, because of the time, we just structured our conversation into the challenges and the possible solution. One of the challenges we found with regards to the restriction of youths in areas of leadership and political participation is rising apathy, because youths feel that they are not heard. So there's distrust and apathy from on the part of youth, because they feel they are not heard and not considered by leaders. Another one is the resources to run for office and internal party democracy restricts youth from participating. So it's more like a structural thing. And the solutions, because of time, we had a lot, but we could only pick just two to say before the time ran out. The two solutions we were able to come up with is someone strongly mentioned in our group that power is not given, it is taken. So, and as a result, youths must be politically engaged. And to break that further, when we talked about the fact that it has to do with a lot of resources. So someone also suggested that youth need to build strategic skills to become economically empowered. And in that way, we will be able to participate in governance and politics from the grassroots up to the national level. So that's the finding from my own group, the governance and civic group. Are there hands for other groups? We're trying to see if there are hands already. I can't see any hands yet. Who are the representatives of other groups? I will just give a minute from now. If we do not have representatives from other groups to present, we can as well just move quickly and smoothly so that we wrap up the event. Okay, so I'm moving further and I'm moving forward all the same. I hope we got
someone, can you hear me? Someone from education is here and I think is trying to speak.
Please unmute the person. Then you can also drop your contributions in the chat.
Yes, I would also suggest that we can drop the contributions in the chat box to save our time.
No way to raise your hand. No, yeah, it's just tap on the three dots you can find in your screen and you will see raise hand. Tap on the three dots you can see on your screen after the chat. You will see more options there.
All right, good day, everyone. Okay,
Ayo,
sure.
a minute, please.
Okay.
Let's go.
All right. Thank you so much, and thank you for the program. So, ours group is Digital Life and Innovation, and one of the problems we talked about was lack of natural creativity and natural thinking, as well as over dependence on AI tools. So we talked about working on the policy, or adding a policy that that trains youths and Nigerians on the ethical and responsible use of AI. So that way, people don't over depend on AI, just like one of the speakers has said. So the other one is effective training to job placement and policy. So we've seen that a lot of interventions for youth by the government most times depends on, or most times shows that people go for a 2 to 3 days training and they end up getting a certificate that they can't defend. So the policy that we came up with is to provide effective training, probably a long time training for youths, and in such a way that once they are done with the training, they get job placement as well, instead of just having a training and not knowing where to go from there. So those are the, in short, those are the two policies problems and
Thank
policies we care about. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very, very much. Ayo, can you raise your hand? So you will be next to speak. Ayo, the representing the climate group. Can you please unmute Ayo? Ayo Iola. Ayo Mide Iola.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ayo.
Are you hearing me?
We can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay. I'll be presenting on climate, environment, and what's the topic again? Yeah, climate, environment, and a just transition. The policy I came up with is a good investment from the federal government. We need the skills actually to tackle climate change, such as changing weather and our activity that contribute to this climate change. So we need to be properly skilled, maybe through skills and enterprise accelerator that could actually be a game changer. And by offering training in kind of maybe like solar training, water recycling, waste recycling, and climate smart agriculture. So we can also do something like ecosystem restoration, or maybe all this kind of mentorship program that will actually change our perspective towards climate change and environment. So I think that is the policy I actually think. That should be the inclusion of a workshop or training from the federal government. Thank you.
Hi, Celestine, are you there? Can we speak now?
Please go on.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Ihecholo. I'll be speaking on behalf of the Economy and Livelihood breakout room. So our question was, what is the bigger structural issue that is preventing youths from gaining gainful employment and, in essence, having good livelihoods or source of livelihood or establishing themselves financially? And we identified about 4. We identified quality education. There's a mismatch between what is being taught at all our levels of education and what is being expected in the society. So the gap, the lack of critical thinking, problem solving modules or courses that would enhance those skills are part of the reason, as well as at the vocational training part of it. There is no institutionalized format of vocational training across the nation. And so we have it in the informal sector, apprenticeship and all of that, but because it is not institutionalized, a good number of people are being cut off from that. So the accessibility gap is still widened, or is still wide. We identified poverty as well as the absence of social protection, especially when a youth is transitioning from a job loss or trying to switch careers. There is no social protection or social infrastructure in place to ensure that that person is adequately provided for at least the basic needs of funding or welfare, as we see in developed countries, pending when the person gets a new job or a new source of income strategy on and running. And also the absence of social infrastructure. This is particularly directed to entrepreneurs. We have young people who are investing so much money in starting small businesses, SMEs. However, because we lack the basic social infrastructure of good roads, good logistics system, lights, storage facilities, all of these efforts as translated into cost of operation as opposed to them seeing profit. So I'm in line with that. One policy that we discussed because of lack of time would be a policy, particularly addressing the quality education front, a policy that ensures that our curriculum adequately matches up the changes that we see in the job market. So we have the World Bank pushing out reports on the future of work and where employers or skills employers are going to grade find relevant in the coming years. Is our curriculum matching up to that? So we need to have consistent curriculum review. We need to have implementation that are very tight to ensure that what is being taught to these young people are equally what is found or what can be put into practice by the time they get a job. So they are not missing out on opportunities that would be beneficial to them, as well as funding. We also discussed that a national bill or a policy that backs funding for SMEs particularly. So while there are so many interventions on that front, implementation has always been a problem for the Nigerian environment. So we hear all of this in the news, but how many people are benefiting from it? So there needs to be a tight screw on implementation and making sure that the fund is directed to the people who actually needs it and will benefit from it. We were to discuss interventions from the government that are currently working. I know on the digital front, 3MTT is doing quite a good work in training young people with skills to push up the digital skills or digital literacy of the Nigerian young population. That's one intervention I know that is working. I just hope that implementation again is being looked into to make sure that people are not just accumulating certificates, like one of our colleagues here mentioned. They're not just accumulating certificates, but actually translating that into applicable knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. You largely captured what I would call the mind of a young Nigerian in an ever developing world, in an ever globalized world. I specifically picked from you the fact that educational realities should match the global. So curriculums should match the jobs that have that we know are going to be in the near future or even in this present time. So nobody should be studying to solve the problems of the past. We should be studying to solve the problems of the present and that of the future. Thank you very, very much, Uwandu. Is there any other contribution from any of the groups before we call it a day, before we call it a wrap? All right, ladies and gentlemen, it has been an amazing time. I think we've spent over an hour on this call, and it's so far an amazing one. So I'm going to be calling up shortly a very, very special person. But before I do so, I want to seize this opportunity to remind us that just as we are having this virtual conversation now, we are going to be having conversations physically in about 3 states in Nigeria. So if you are in any part of Nigeria where I'm going to call now, if you are in these 3 parts, you can register to join the event live. So we're going to be having a physical consultation in Benue State, in Bauchi, and also in Rivers State. Our links are out. I think a tech team member will drop the link here in the comment section now so that you can register for the physical event if you are in any of these states. And we look forward to seeing you, hearing from you, and implementing and also taking these very important decisions, and implementation is very important and is key too. Thank you very much. So without wasting any further time, I want to welcome the convener. I want to welcome the person who made it possible for all of us to be here. No other person than the executive director of the NG Youth SDGs, Mr. Joshua Alade, as he gives us the closing remark for today's consultation. If Mr. Josh is online, please, over to you, sir.
All right. Thank you so much, Celestine. Hello, everyone. I hope you are doing well. It's been 2 hours on this call, and this already shows your passion and your commitment to Nigeria. So thank you so much all for joining this consultation. Really want to say that, as you've heard from all of the speakers, the National Youth Policy should be a reflection of you. And I know that we do not have so much time. So I had an activity, but I'll just ask us to move forward without that activity. As we look ahead, we already know that the Federal Ministry of Youth is holding consultations. We are also holding consultations in 3 states, but it's not just about the consultations alone. It's also about what we do after these consultations. For us, following this meeting, we are going to come up with a report, and it's also going to support us in writing some policy recommendation around the implementation of the National Youth Policy. So we all have your emails. We would keep you in the loop of how everything is going. I want to encourage you all to please go to the link that I have shared for you to sign up if there's a consultation happening in your state. Also, if you want to hear more from us, you can subscribe to our mailing list. By going to our website, www.nigerianyouthsdgs.org, to have access to all the information that comes up from us. Our goal is that the National Youth Policy should be a reflection of your ambition, of your aspiration, and also of the needs that you have as a young Nigerian. Your voice, your agency, your participation is really very important, and youth leadership should not be tokenistic, it should be collaborative. If we are creating a new national youth policy, it should be a reflection of the realities that we face today, the reality of digital inclusion and innovation in AI, talking about brain drain, talking about migration, like Shedrack had said. And if you all participated in your breakout room, you will see that we had made sure to extend all the thematic areas to about 10, talking about mental health, talking about the issue of inclusion, social protection. There are issues that usually would miss out in this kind of conversation. But with young people taking the lead, we can better inform how the National Youth Policy would go. Next step is this consultations in Benue, in Bauchi, and in Rivers. We would also have another Zoom consultation, like a validation with other youth organizations, sometimes in March. Finally, also is that we would organize another event, a high-level stakeholders event, with some partners in Abuja, just looking again at the National Youth Policy. What should be the way forward once the policy has been launched and approved? We need to talk about how are we implementing this National Youth Policy? How are we funding it? Ibrahim Farouk of Yaga Africa raised a very important question. He said, how are we monitoring and evaluating the National Youth Policy? How are we sure that this policy is actually working? It is very, very important that we pick in M and E. So I want to encourage you all, ask questions, engage with the campaign. If you have other people that you think should know about this, please inform them about what we are doing at Nigerian Youth SDGs. It's about youth leadership. It's about ensuring that your voice and your agency counts. I want to thank every one of you for being on this call. I want to thank all of the speakers, Dr. Shedrack Akpem, Sholakpe, Dr. Progress. Thank you, Evangeline, for moderating the panel. Celestine and Deborah, thank you for anchoring this session. And also thanking Ikena from Leap Africa for also being there to give some context around the National Youth Policy. Please, I encourage you, please, to read the National Youth Policy. The 2019 to 2023, it might be old, it might look expired, but there's still gems in that National Youth Policy. Read it. If you have questions, we are available to answer. You can send us a question to info@nigerianyouthsdgs.org. Engage with us on social media. And I hope that in not too long, we would have a National Youth Policy that is a reflective of our desires as young people, our needs as young people, and also of our aspirations as young people. Thank you so much, everyone. Over to you, Celestine and Deborah.
Thank you so much, Mr. Josh. We are grateful, and it is on this note that we urge you to follow us on all social media. Just search for NG Youth SDGs. And the beauty of it is that before you finish typing, you'll see us. There's only one NG Youth SDGs in the world. So please follow us on all social media. You can also access our website. They've been dropped in the comments section. And also, we want to urge you, please register to join the consultation in your specific area. If you're in Benue, if you're in Bauchi, or if you are in Rivers State, please register to join the physical consultation. It is on this note that we say thank you for joining. Very importantly, beyond just joining meetings, beyond being invited to hear our voices, our goal is to ensure that we actually have youths at the helm of affairs, sitting and presiding over issues that concern our own lives. Thank you very much, young Nigerians, for joining this call. I say thank you again, and goodbye for now. You'll hear more from us. Thank you very much.